Great Writers Media.
Welcome to Books of the Month. We're glad that you could join us, and we have a very, very special guest with us this month. Mr. Miller, how are you, sir?
I'm very good. I'm having a wonderful day. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I want you to do this for us. Introduce yourself to our viewing audience. Tell them a little bit about who Mr. Miller is.
Well, Mr. Miller grew up in upstate New York and went to college in Albany, New York. And after college, I joined the Army and was an accountant in the Army. And while I was in the Army, I got married. And that was 62 years ago.
Wow.
My wife and I are still married, and we have 4 children and 7 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren.
My goodness.
So
7 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren.
yes.
So,
And we were very, very fortunate at a young age to be able to purchase 100 acres with an old farmhouse in the country. We're just 10 miles outside of Schenectady. So we live what we would consider a perfect life in rural America.
my goodness, what a blessing. Now, when many people think of New York, they don't think of that. I was just telling someone recently, you can go to New York, you find farmland and everything. That's such a blessing. Listen, you've written this fascinating book, and it is so beautifully written. Icespy. I thought, wow. Fiction often mirrors truth, and you get just as close as you want to be to nonfiction in this fast-paced novel that turned the turmoil surrounding the U.S. Now, I'm fascinated, Mr. Miller, because when I look at this, the Bobsled Federation, which you were so very instrumental, you're the pioneer. I'm reading this. I say he's the pioneer of this thing, and the turmoil that involved it, and what you must have lived. It says that it turned it into shocking international intrigue. The pace is faster than a sled on ice, and it races from Lake Placid, New York. I remember that, to the burrows of the CIA at Langley, Virginia. Mr. Miller, talk to our viewing audience about this fascinating book and this intriguing life that you live.
Well, the book really involves 2 parts of my life. The first part was bobsledding, where I raced bobsleds from 1980 to 1986. And then in 1987, I began coaching the Olympic team. But during this time, the organization was fairly small, under 100 members. We had some people from the mafia get involved, and they brought in people and paid for memberships for over 200 people. So every time we had an annual meeting, they took control.
Yeah.
And it took a while for us to understand why. And we don't know for sure. It's never been proven, but we assume they were using their Olympic credentials to move cash across borders to Switzerland. With Olympic credentials, you don't need to show your luggage when you cross borders, and we assumed that was the purpose of what they were doing. So that created.
As I was reading this book, I said, look at this life, such a fascinating book. Our viewing audience needs to go and purchase this book, because I'm navigating this journey with you as I'm reading the book. And to hear you talk about this again, so fascinating. Please share more.
Well, the other part of it was the involvement with the CIA. And I was, at this time, active duty in the Air Force, and they would give me time to race or coach during the bobsled season. And I was in West Germany in the fall of 1987 when we were selecting the Olympic team for the '88 Olympics. And a man came up to me the first day of practice, introduced himself, said he was a Canadian working for a British radio station as a sports interviewer, and he wanted to do an interview with me. So we did the interview, and the next day he came back and he wanted to do another one. And then on the third day, he asked me if I had taken any days off while I was over there. And I said, yes. We were there for 7 weeks. I said, we take every Monday off. He wanted to know if I would accompany him into East Germany because he wanted to interview the East German bobsled coach. And if he had me with him, it would really help him getting across the border.
So, Mr. Miller, let me ask you this. Now, this is a fascinating story. So here you are, you're active military.
Yes.
At the same time, you're on the bobsled team, and then you become the coach of the bobsled team for the United States of America.
Yes.
You're involved in the Olympics. Big
Yes.
time. But at the same time, you're saying that the mafia has gotten involved because of the ease, if you will, that they have to move about. So now they're involved.
Yes.
You get approached by someone. As you've written this fascinating book, this fascinating novel, what would be some key elements that you would want our viewing audience to get that would impel them to go and purchase this book?
I think perhaps the biggest one is the fact that as the story goes along, I ended up in the Soviet Union, in Riga, Latvia. And the reason I was in Riga, Latvia is the Minister of Sports of the Soviet team. They were all Latvians and they were from Riga. He, during a press conference to announce an agreement we had reached to have the Soviet team come to Lake Placid in 1990 to celebrate the 10th anniversary, at the end of the press conference, a reporter who we found out afterwards was flown in from Moscow, which was rather odd. He was equivalent to Tom Brokaw at the time.
Yeah.
And this was a small event, and nobody could understand why they had such a big name there. And what happened was at the very end, he stood up and he said, Mr. Miller, since 1940, when the Russians occupied Latvia, the Latvian Socialist State has never conducted business on its own without first seeking permission from Moscow. My question to you is this. As an American, did it bother you to avoid Moscow and deal directly with the Latvian Socialist State? I had no clue to what he was talking about, and I responded, no. As an American, anytime I deal with a foreign government, I must inform my government, which I did. I left the invitation to the Soviet Bobsled organization. He repeated the question to the Minister of Sports, who stood up and said he did not invite the Americans. The Latvian Socialist State debated for 3 months on how to handle the invitation. They decided the time had come for Latvians to handle their own affairs and not Moscow.
So here you are. You've essentially an active duty military person with the Air Force. Bobsledder, and coach. Now you've been pulled into the political arena, not a local political arena, but an international political arena by one of the most powerful countries in the world, all type of intrigue. You're taking us on a fascinating journey in this fascinating book that you've written, Icespy, and now we can connect that bobsledding on the ice and then the spy, the intrigue of all that. Tell me, how did you feel being pulled into this situation, and what were some things going through your mind? We want our viewing audience to go and purchase this fascinating book. How did you feel during that time?
Well, I wasn't sure how I should react, but your basic instinct, especially as a military person, is to stay alive.
Yes.
And I, in the middle of the night, when the KGB came to my room and wanted me to go with them to make statements, I refused to do it. They pressured me from about 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. I finally agreed to go with them at 9 o'clock in the morning, and they left. And at 5, I snuck out of the hotel on the fire escape and called our contact, who then had us pack our bags and leave them in the room, but meet them. And they took us to the Communist Party Hotel in Tallinn, Estonia, where they hid us for 4 days.
Listen, go. Wait a minute. You're in your hotel. As the viewing audience purchase this book, you're going to carry them on this fascinating journey. I was reading that. I was blown away when I read that. You're going to carry our viewing audience on this journey. I want our viewing audience to go and purchase this book because you're going to navigate the journey with Mr. Miller. As you were reading it, I found myself just pulled into this vacuum of a life that a young military person is living, serving his country, love bobsledding. Now he has some opportunities to participate in the Olympics, but now his very life is on the line because other colleagues of his have been taken. Now they come in the middle of the night. They want him to go with them. Mr. Miller, this is so fascinating. You and audience, go and purchase this book, Icespy. So, Mr. Miller, take now, pick up where you left off at. You pack your bag, but
We
escorted to a safe haven, if you will. Take about a minute and a half before we take a break and tell our viewing audience about
Well, they hid us in the Communist Party Hotel in Tallinn, Estonia, which is the last place they would look for us. But the sad part is the Minister of Sports and the president of the Bobsled Association and another person, I don't know who, they were arrested the next day and within a week were executed for crimes against the Soviet government. And so after 4 days, they put us at night on a boat going to Helsinki, Finland, and that's how we got out of the country.
Now, viewing audience, I want you to come on, go on this fascinating journey. As Mr. Miller is just sharing this, I'm traveling with him, and I know that you're traveling with him also. And I'm just picturing this young man in the Air Force, the fear that must have gripped you and the unknowns that were there had to be fascinating. Listen, I want you to stop right there. We're going to come back and pick up on this. Here you are. People have been executed, never seen again. You're in a safe place until we're going to be right back and we're going to talk about that. I want you to go out and purchase this book by Mr. Miller. It's called Icespy, an Air Force person, a bobsledder participating in the Olympics. Such an intriguing, I'm going to tell you, this is so fascinating. We're going to continue to take this journey with Mr. Miller. Fascinating, Mr. Miller. Now, continue to help us as we go on this journey with you. You live in this life. You've been removed so that your life can be shared. You just talked about how some people have been executed. I was looking at something here. It says Cold War history was made, and you talk about the Soviet Union, and the person got up and made this amazing statement. And
Yes.
it was something that was just out of the ordinary. He makes an amazing statement at a press conference. And then it talks about the Soviet Union bobsled team would visit Lake Placid. So you shared that with me. How did that impact you? You're navigating this journey, you're living this life, and you're taking us on this journey with this book. I'm so involved in it. Continue to share with us this life that you live and what the importance of this book is to our human audience.
Well, the important thing for people to take away is I was simply an Air Force person who was very active in sports, and suddenly, without understanding why, I'm thrust in the middle of international intrigue. But I very, very quickly understood my survival would depend upon how I reacted. And you're very I was very fortunate to have the military training that enabled me to deal with these circumstances. Otherwise, I probably would have been arrested, and I don't know if I would still be there or if I would have been executed. But the importance of it prior to going there, I had researched, and the Latvia itself had filed papers in the international courts to have the papers that the Russians used in 1940 to occupy them ruled as illegal. So I knew that there was turmoil going on, and I was briefed by the Air Force that if I got involved in a situation where I had to deal with the media, how I should react. And that certainly was extremely helpful to me. And the secret to how to react is to say as little as possible.
Yes, sir. Yes. You know, being ex-military myself, and when we travel abroad, that's one of the things that our government would always bring us up to date. You don't tell you give no information. The basic thing, if you're going to give information, is your name and that serial number.
Yes.
Application number. I remember
Name, rank, and serial number.
that's the 2525525. I remember that thing. Yeah. So now you're carrying us on this journey, such a fascinating journey, and it's so eloquently written in the book. I want to once again encourage our viewing audience, you need to get a copy of this book. Use it to have discussion with your family. Use it to get with a group of people to show how you can be a person serving your country. And this young man gets pulled into a political turmoil that involves the world. But he's been trained, he's very astute, and he knows how to navigate this journey. Mr. Miller, come on, continue to share this with us, please.
Well, one of the hard things is the invitation they sent us was for 8 weeks. And back when this happened, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have laptop computers. So communication back with America was not existent. And my wife was home with 4 children, and I was able to make in the middle of the night a 2-minute phone call to her after 3.5 weeks. And that was the only contact she had with me. And this event happened after 6.5 weeks. But when I wrote the book, I was encouraged to write the book by several people. And one of the things that I wanted readers to be able to do would be to visualize their being there so they could understand exactly what was going on. And I tried to write with description, and of course, having lived it enabled me to do it a little bit more than if I was just doing fiction.
Well, Mr. Miller, let me tell you, sir, you have accomplished your goal. As I'm reading this book, I am actually taking this journey with you. As we're even talking about it, I'm sensing what you must have been experiencing and how intense things get when you're in the middle of it. So congratulations, you have accomplished your goal. This is a fascinating journey. I want to encourage our viewing audience to go out and purchase a copy of this book, Icespy, a young bobsledder who becomes a coach of a bobsled team, but he's in the Air Force. And he's pulled into international political turmoil involving the Soviet Union. Mr. Miller, talk to us again about this. I'm getting chills as we talk about this.
Well, the man that was with me was Professor Jerome Malinowski from Syracuse University. And the reason he was with me is he was working with me on design. So he had gone over there to study, if you will, the Soviet sleds to help him design a better bobsled for us. And he actually was smuggled out of the country along with me. And when we were in Tallinn, Estonia, he and I would wander the streets late at night because that's the only time that we felt safe that we could leave the hotel. And the cover of Icespy is actually the entrance to the old Tallinn, Estonia, that was built in 1209. And it was amusing because he taught how to design books to his students at Syracuse. And I suggested to him how I thought the cover should be. And he laughed and he says, "You write the book and I'll do the design work." And he built a beautiful cover for the book. And just a little background on him, on his qualities. He was a design person for Ford Motor and designed the original Ford Mustang.
Oh my. Now, the cover is so beautifully designed. The book is so beautifully written. So you have this collaboration and you come up with, it's a beautiful cover, beautiful book. I mean, inside out, the book is excellent. And so now you say, so he designed the Ford Mustang. I remember how popular that Mustang was when it first came out. Still popular. But you
Yes.
designed it. We have 5 minutes and 30 seconds left. Share with us, with our viewing audience, give them some more nuggets that will make them want to rush out and get a copy of this book. And I would suggest get more than one copy and gift a copy to someone.
Yes. Well, I think the greatest thing about the book was the fact that there was so much of it was actually true, that it actually happened. And once, and the other background on the book that is interesting was how we got involved with the Soviet Union. And when I was at the Olympics, just a strange thing, I got up to get an extra cup of coffee before practice, and this woman in front of me who had a Soviet bobsled jacket on turned to me and said in English, "Good morning." Well, this is very unusual for the Soviets to talk to you. And I said, "Good morning." And I asked her, I said, "Well, what is your position with the Soviet bobsled team?" And she said, "Well, I'm their interpreter." Well, it turned out she was the interpreter for the Soviet Minister of Sports. And he invited us to join him. We met him for breakfast for 3 mornings.
Wow.
And that is how I developed the relationship with the Soviet Bobsled Organization. I'm a photographer and took a lot of telephotos of the Soviet team whenever I was able to in their sleds. I had them all developed there were about 30 of them, into 8x10 photos. And I mailed a copy to the Minister of Sports and to the Soviet coach, who was my counterpart. And we began corresponding, and he invited us to have a cultural exchange. Now, I'm not familiar with their politics, but I assumed it's probably a lot like American politics. And somehow word got to people in Moscow that we were having this press conference and suspected he might say what he was going to say, and I think that's why they flew this important interviewer in.
Yes. Wow. This is so fascinating. It's a journey for those of you who are viewing that you want to go on. Take this journey as Mr. Miller has so eloquently laid it out. I'm fascinated. I know you're fascinated as you listen to this. You're talking about this fascinating book, Icespy, an Air Force person who's a bobsledder participating in the Olympics. And Lake Placid, I remember Lake Placid, you talk about those Olympics. But here he finds himself in the Soviet Union. He's being interviewed, he's being investigated, he's offered to go and take a trip with the KGB. And we've seen movies about the KGB. When they show up, it's not going to be anything good. But he finds a way of escape because of some people who are there. Mr. Miller, we have 1 minute and 50 seconds left. Give our viewing audience information that you may want to give about email, website address, anything of that nature, if you're available to speak. Take about 60 seconds to share that information.
Well, I'm often asked to give talks on the occasion, which I do, which is the book. And if people are interested in having me speak or to purchase the book, if they go to my website, authornormanmiller.com, the information would be there. And I think they would be fascinated because it's a true story. So you wonder how many other stories are out there
Yes.
that's not written.
Getting that information again.
It's authornormanmiller.com.
That's your website.
Yes. And that will have all my information.
Excellent. We know that the book can be purchased on Amazon. So they
Yes.
can purchase it on Amazon also.
Yes.
Goodness. And you are available to speak.
Yes, I am.
Now, if they want you to speak, do they put that request in via your website, or do you want to give any other information?
My website would be the best, or if they wanted to email me, my email is nmiller@lmny.org. And the LMNY stands for Leadership Management New York. I ran a business teaching CEOs leadership management skills for 14 years.
Mr. Miller, thank you so much. We have 5 seconds. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
I'm Dr. Larry Carnes. This has been Books of the Month. Thank you for tuning in, and join us again next month for Books of the Month.
Visit www.greatwritersmedia.com. Email us at info@greatwritersmedia.com. Call us at 877-600-5469. Subscribe now.